And if we can justify spending more money on quality from 0 to 4, we might find that it pays for itself on the back end just in the K through 12 system, not to mention the return on investment when those children become productive members of the economy. And on that subject, I want to cite the experience I had in New York recently at visiting the Harlem Children's Zone and hearing Jeffrey Canada. And Susan Landry was there, and I didn't make her panel presentation there, so I'm glad I get to hear it today. But Jeffrey Canada has founded a remarkable organization in Harlem that is creating a pipeline of services to wrap around children from prenatal care through college, but with a heavy, heavy emphasis on remediating that inequity that children in Harlem experience from the ages of 0 to 4 relative to the experience that I'm trying to provide to my own 2 daughters. And he said, and he was asked, you know, he's the thing about the program, and it's a remarkable program and it's showing pretty extraordinary results, but it's expensive. And he raises a lot of private money for it. And he goes to Wall Street to raise the money, and they say to him, you know, Jeff, it's a great program, but you're going to have to find something more scalable. You know, it's $5,000 per kid above and beyond what these families are accessing in terms of government services, $5,000 per kid per year. It's an extraordinary investment. Now, $5,000 per kid per year is a lot of money. It is less than what each of you in this room probably intend to spend on your children if you have children, or probably will watch your grandchildren have spent on them. It is what we all intend to provide our kids. And if the question is, you know, would I want my, whenever the question is on a question of quality investment, the question you should ask yourself about whether it's right for the system is, would I insist upon it for my own children, right? But it's costly, because there's nothing, I mean, that is the one area as a parent where we don't look to cut corners and we don't skimp when we're paying for something for our children. But not every family has the ability to go a little bit over the budget when they pay for childcare. So what Jeff Canada says to those investors in his program about his $5,000 per year per kid cost is, you know, what they say to him is, Jeff, it's just not scalable. How are we going to ever get this out of Harlem and put it throughout the whole city of New York or the state or the country? It's just not scalable. And he says, you know, when kids who come out of Harlem get in trouble with the law and stand before a judge on armed robbery charges, and the judge sentences them to 20 years in prison, nobody says, at a cost of $90,000 or $120,000 per year, nobody says to the judge, you know, that would be nice to lock that kid up for 20 years, but it's just not scalable. We can't afford it. And if we are going to continue to scale the criminal justice system to meet the needs of these children who just never had a fair shake in life, who never got the opportunities that I intend to provide my daughters, we've got to think another way. We've got to think of another way of doing business. So within the framework of a zero-sum system, the choice where you strike the balance between quality and quantity is a really tough decision. I think we have to address it, because I don't know that we'll be able to break out of that framework in the coming 2 years. I just don't know where new money is going to come from for the system in the budget situation that we're in. I could be pleasantly surprised. It could be that the federal government makes a bigger investment in this. It could be that through the course of today's discussions and hearings that my committee is going to be holding, we can find ways to do more with less. And that ought to be all of our goals. But in the longer term, I hope that we can find a way to expand the system. Because I know this. I know that as my wife and I struggle as a team with relatively healthy resources available to us, not to mention grandparents, as we struggle to deal with the day-to-day management challenges of raising 2 daughters, I think I marvel every day at single moms who do it, and at families who do it living at poverty level incomes. I just can't imagine what it would mean to those families to not have access to federally subsidized childcare. And I know there are families who desperately need it today who currently don't have access to it, because we've already struck that line. we've already, probably without a whole lot of conscious decision making behind it, said we're going to only pay for so many kids, knowing that the demand is greater. We've been able to chip away at the wait lists in the past year with the help of federal stimulus money, but before the stimulus money came along, the wait list was in the tens of thousands. There are families who desperately need these services so that they can work, so that they can feed their families, so that they can advance themselves in lives, and they want quality as much as we want it for our children. So those are the challenges we face. They're not easy to solve, they're not trivial, but they're extraordinarily important. I don't know any issue that affects parents more directly than this one. It's somewhat surprising to me because of that it's not one of the primary political issues you hear about during campaign seasons. Partly, I think, because it's obscured by the extraordinary complexity of the administration of the system. But for some reason, it hasn't been an issue that politicians get held accountable for. So the last thing I would say to y'all is, you really need to, especially those of you who are in a direct interface position with clients of the system, you really need to mobilize those clients. I mean, I hear from the parents in the K through 12 education system all the time about the policies that we make in the legislature with respect to their kids' public schools. We do not hear as much from the clients of the child care system. And I think that needs to be a part of the discussion. So I'll close with one last story about politics. When I got out of college, I worked in 1990 on Ann Richards' first campaign for governor. And I was just out of school. I was a huge fan of Ann Richards, but I have to admit I was also scared to death of her. She terrified me. And for those of you who knew her, there was ample cause to be a little bit intimidated by Ann Richards. After that experience, I went to work at the Capitol, then I went and ran a nonprofit, and then I started my own company. And 14 years later, I came home and decided I was going to run for state representative. And everybody told me, well, the first thing you have to do is call Ann Richards and get her support. And I knew they were right, but I also found that at the age of 37, I was as terrified of Ann Richards as I had been at 22. So reluctantly, I picked up the phone, I called her, I told her I was running for office, and I asked her if she would support me. And she was very stern. She said, "Mark, why are you doing this?" And because I was nervous, I launched into my entire stump speech. I told her everything I believe in, all of the issues that I care about, all of the ways I could make a difference if I was elected. I poured all of my passion and idealism into this way too lengthy soliloquy. And when I finally ran out of breath, there was 5 seconds of silence on the other end of the phone. And then for the first time in all the time that I'd known her, Ann softened up toward me. And she said, "Aw, sweetie, that may be the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my entire life." She said, "The only smart reason to run for office is because you can win. So why don't you tell me how you're going to win?" And I share that with you because it's a great story, but also because it is relevant to what you're here about today. We all get into politics with a passion and an idealism and a vision, and that is the right reason and the right way to get started. But we also don't get anywhere unless we figure out how to work within the system and how to effectuate change, usually incrementally, very pragmatically, and that's what politics is about. So I close by urging you to take what you discover here today and translate it into something usable in the political process, something actionable by a legislature and a policymaking branch that, as you know, have their limitations. Thank you all for being here today.